Yeah, because Lori's Fathom is one.
Oh,
Yeah, that
right.
takes up one. Hi.
Hello. Hello. How's everybody doing? We have April and we have Lori. We have Matt. Okay, this is going to be a small group of people, but we'll get started and hopefully others will hop on as we do this. So welcome to Siegel Solutions Deep Dive on 1099s. I'm Aimee Garneau, the Manager of Accounting Services, and I'm going to be today's presenter. Just a little bit, wait, I'm not sharing my screen. Jeez. Okay. A little bit about, can everybody see my screen?
Hmm.
So a little bit about me, over 20 years of experience doing year ends and 1099s and all the fun things like that. I do oversee 100 plus monthly clients here at Siegel, along with my team members, and I lead the client accounting services team here at Siegel, and I am a QuickBooks Pro advisor. So let's just dig right in, shall we? Okay. So let me ask, there's a small group of us, but
Aimee, do you want to start as a slideshow so we can see it larger?
okay, yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
I should have just started it. Okay, but now you can't. I'm sharing
You
the
just
other
have to
screen.
swap screens. Sorry.
Okay. Why 1090? Okay, so here we are. So why 1099s matter. Um, Form 1099s are just, it's more than paperwork, as many of us might think. It's key to compliance with the IRS and our other tax systems. A business must issue 1099s to help stay on the right side of IRS regulations, and it builds trust with your vendors and your contractors. So it's something that we must do. What are 1099s for? 1099s are for when a business pays a non-employee, like an independent contractor, consultant, a freelancer, any service vendor over $600 or more in a calendar year. For services, those payments typically must be reported to the IRS using one of the 1099 forms. Most often for contractors and non-compensated employees, it is the 1099 ENC. There are other payments that are required to have a 1099 as well, includes rent, legal settlements, royalties, interest, prizes, things like that require the 1099 miscellaneous form. And it really just depends on the instance on what form you use. The IRS uses the 1099s to match against what the vendors or contractors report on their personal income tax returns. Missing or incorrect 1099s can result in IRS notices penalties. So the penalties do start at $60 a form and can go up to $330 per form or higher if the IRS thinks that you intentionally disregarded sending a 1099. And it does most often trigger audits, which nobody on this call wants to be part of that, for sure not. Filing 1099s correctly shows that your business is organized and compliant, and it reflects well on the operations and it protects you from unnecessary risk. So it is very, very important. Why it matters to your vendors or your contractors, they really depend on this to accurately report their income to the IRS. If they don't receive a 1099, they still are responsible for reporting the income. However, without the proper documentation, it creates confusion with their tax preparers and may lead to errors or underreporting, which is another issue that we don't want to get into that either. Timely and accurate 1099s helps the vendors avoid tax issues and reinforces your relationship with them. So it's all very, very important. The IRS receives copies of the 1099s that are issued. And like I said before, they compare the tax returns that they get to those 1099s. If somebody underreports their income, it could potentially trigger an audit, just depending on. And if the business fails to file the 1099s, it can face penalties and other IRS scrutiny, which we don't want to see happen to any of our clients or any of our potential clients. So my insight here is that 1099s promote transparency, compliance, and accurate tax filing, which is critical for protecting your business and your contractors. They are not optional. Some people do think they are optional. I'm here to tell you, not an optional thing. And it is required to be part of responsible business accounting. So it's something that is not, like I said, but if you take anything from this, this is something that is not optional. If you feel like doing it, you do it. If you feel like you don't, don't. I would not recommend that to anybody. Okay? Any questions so far? Okay. The IRS, so the company is the payer and the person receiving the 1099 is the recipient. The IRS requires businesses to issue 1099 forms to report certain types of payments made in the course of trade or business. This does not include anything for personal or household payments. You must typically issue the 1099 ENC or the miscellaneous form if you have paid someone or a company over $600. You must pay an individual, a sole proprietor, a partnership, or an LLC that's taxed not as an S Corp or a C Corp. So S Corps and C Corps do not receive 1099s. For services rendered, including labor, consulting, independent contracting work, professional services like a bookkeeping firm, a graphic designer, a repair or technician. You can also issue 1099s for rent, for commercial property and equipment rentals. Those are reported on the 1099 miscellaneous on inbox 1. Royalties, which I'm not sure many of us do that, but there are some companies that pay royalties. If it's $10 or more, it is required a 1099 miscellaneous form. Prizes, awards, and other non-employee compensation. So all non-employee compensation is reported on the 1099 ENC. All the other like prizes and awards do get issued on the 1099 miscellaneous. Medical and health payments, those are reported on the 1099 miscellaneous form. And legal services. So all attorneys, no matter what type of entity they are, you do need to send them a 1099. If it is for legal fees, so if they're, representing you or they're helping you in some legal way, they do get a 1099 ENC. If you use them for a purchase or a sale of property, that does go on a 1099 miscellaneous form through the gross proceeds and settlement. Although probably most of us don't do that. Most of it is the legal fees. So you'll see it on the 1099 ENC. My pro tip here is always collect the W-9 forms before making payment. You need to have, it is a requirement of the IRS to have a W-9 form on file for every vendor that you pay, whether it's $600 or more, because the first time you pay them, it might be $300. And then as months go by, you might not, and then maybe in April, you pay them another 200. And then in November, you pay them $1,000. So through the course of the year, you've now paid them over $600. You want to be collecting these as you bring on vendors so that there's not a big rush at the end of the year to collect those. Okay. And really, you should be collecting them, as I said, rather you need a 1099 or not. It's just a good practice. Who does not receive a 1099? So employees do not receive a 1099. So an employee cannot be a W-2 employee and a 1099 employee. So if you are, if you're reimbursing an employee for something, they would not get a 1099 for that. I do recommend doing reimbursements through payroll, but and it's also very important to note here that, and this is a whole different webinar, but the difference between an employee and a contractor. So if you are controlling how, when, and where they do their work, I'm here to tell you that they are an employee by classification. And they should be classified as such because you can go down a slippery slope if they're classified wrong. But that's a whole different, we're not here to talk about that today. That's a whole different one. Corporations, like I said before, payments to C Corps and S Corps are generally exempt from 1099 reporting unless, like I said before, they are an attorney, medical or healthcare providers, and vendors receiving fish purchases for cash. So I'm not sure how many of us are doing that, but okay. If it's for merchandise, inventory, storage fees, and freight, no 1099. Even if you're renting a storage space, that's not rent. That's not considered rent in this instance. Lori, do you have a question?
I do. My question is corporations, you put attorneys there. If you pay rent to a corporation, do they still get a 1099 or only if they're
No.
okay? I just learned something new.
Okay, great. Oh, good. We have some people coming in, so welcome. My name is Aimee Garneau. I'm the manager of accounting services here at Siegel, and we're just talking about 1099s today, which is, I'm sure, is everybody's favorite topic about this time of year. So the takeaway here is 1099s are issued $600 or more to non-corporate service providers is a good way to put it. Unless, again, they're an attorney or a doctor that are receiving medical payments, or if you are sending money to vendors for fish purchases. So that's something very specific that not very many probably on this call do. Payments, and this is another thing that's always a topic of confusion, I think, is payments made via credit card or third-party platforms. So if you pay your vendors by credit card, you do not need to send them a 1099 because they do receive one from the credit card processor. PayPal, Venmo Business, although the threshold was increased this year by Donald Trump's Big Beautiful Bill Act. So prior to 2024, it was like $20,000 was the threshold that Venmo would send one out, right? Or that you would have to send one out that Venmo wouldn't. And then in 2024, it decreased to 600. And then with the Big Beautiful Bill Act, it went back up to $20,000. So, and that is something that changes every single year. And it's based on legislation in Washington. And so we really have to keep a close eye on that. And I try to send out, for those that are clients, I do try to send out those kind of notifications and education because it is something that changes. And unfortunately, we don't know about those things until December or sometimes even January 1, which is a little bit too late at that point. But so that's why just collect the W-9s every time, all the time throughout the year. So here are some common forms that we talked about, and we can send a copy of the presentation out after this so that you have all the slides. But essentially these are the forms, like I said before, 1099 E&C, non-employee compensation. It's paid 600 or more to independent contractors and non-employees for services. In the examples, here we go, freelancers, subcontractors, consulting, and one-time service providers. Only if they're not an S Corp or a C Corp. So if you pay Siegel Solutions, I'll give you a hint, you do not need to send us a 1099. Although we do love the paper, you don't need to send it to us because we are an S Corp. 1099 miscellaneous income, rent, royalties, prizes, awards, and non-service legal payments. So office or equipment rental, royalty income, settlement proceeds to attorneys. 1099K is what you would get from any of the credit cards or the third-party networks, PayPal, Stripe, Square, Venmo, issued by the processors, not your business. 1099 INT, so if you physically pay interest on something to one of your note holders, or your investors, you do need to send out a 1099 INT. But the important thing here is if you pay it. If you're accruing it to pay later, you don't give them a 1099 INT at the time during the year, only if you ever pay it out. Okay? 1099 DIV is for dividends and capital gain distributions. So shareholder payments, dividends from corporate investments, things like that. You may or may not have those. Not sure. Most of our clients here at Siegel do not. And then a 1099-R, which we don't do either. It's distributions from retirement accounts. So you might see that on your personal side for like 401k, pension, annuity, things like that. Okay. And then I just made a little chart here. What are the key differences between the NEC and the miscellaneous? And we went through that pretty much in depth, but the 1099 NEC is issued for non-employee compensation. They must be filed both to the recipient and the IRS by January 31st. And prior to 2020, you did a 1099 miscellaneous, and this was on box 7. That's no longer the case. They changed that in 2020. 1099 miscellaneous is for all other income types that we've talked about in length here. They must be filed to the recipient by January 31st. February 28th, paper to the IRS on March 31st if you e-file, and we'll talk about that in a few little slides later. And still used for payments not related to services. So, but anything for non-employee compensation for services does go over on the NEC. Okay. So why does it matter if you use the correct form? Right? You might say, well, if I make a mistake on the form, it's fine. Well, no, not really. So this will trigger an IRS delay in processing them. Incorrect, your vendors could be reporting their income incorrectly personally. Penalties for filing errors, the IRS could. I've never really seen penalties, but I'm not saying that they couldn't, so I just like to give you the worst case scenario. And there's additional time needed for corrections. So if you're paying somebody for services that is not your employee, any 1099 NEC, not miscellaneous. Understanding, so my takeaway here is that understanding the purpose of each 1099 form helps ensure your business reports things accurately, stays compliant with the IRS and the state agencies. So there are some states that do require a state 1099. And if you have vendors that are in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, that is one state that does require that, just as a heads up. State compliant avoids unnecessary issues with the IRS. I don't think anybody on this call likes to hear from the IRS. I know that I do not. When in doubt, check the instructions on the forms or consult an accounting professional like all of us here at Siegel Solutions. Okay, how to gather this information? Because you might be saying, well, Aimee, that's all well and good, but how do I gather all of this information? So collecting accurate vendor information early and throughout the year and tracking payments consistently throughout the year are essential to a smooth 1099 preparation. Missing or incorrect data is one of the top causes of 1099 errors and IRS penalties. So, like I said, step 1, always request a W-9 before making payments. Before my life here at Siegel, I worked in the corporate world and I managed the accounts payable function in many of those roles. Nobody got paid unless I saw a W-9 come through my desk. So I was a very much a stickler for it, and really it's a good way to be. Always collect them completed form W-9 for each independent contractor, service provider, landlord before issuing payments. So what is on the W-9? So what is on the W-9 is their legal name and their business name, because there might be a DBA, so both. Their federal tax classification. So are they a sole proprietor? Are they an individual? Are they an LLC? If they're an LLC, are they taxed as a partnership? Are they taxed as an S corp? And their tax identification number, or if it's for personal, their social security number, and their address. All the things that really we need to file the 1099s. And W-9s are the essential tool to help determine if you need to send them a 1099. So my tip here is add W-9 collection to your vendor checklist when you start working with another vendor. You might get a contract, there might be other paperwork. Add collecting a W-9 to the process. It will help you in the long run. It might seem like an added step at first, but it is something that is really, really important. So then when your bookkeeper says, hey, I need a W-9, you have it. Or you can send it to them, that. And if you are the bookkeeper, then, really making the clients get that is also very important. Okay. Step 2 is maintain good vendor records all year long. So tracking the following: dates of payments, amounts paid, type of services provided, and the payment method type. So what I will say is 1099s are cash basis. So let's say you invoice this, or this vendor invoices you for 12 every month for 12 months, but you don't pay your December payment until January 1. You don't include the January 1 payment. So it's just any cash outlay that goes from Jan 1 to December 31st. And it doesn't matter if you have a different fiscal year or not. Everything is based on a calendar year when you're thinking about 1099s. Okay. So using accounting software like QuickBooks, I'm not sure how many people. Do we have time for a poll? Do we have a poll set up? So out of curiosity, I'm just curious, how many people use QuickBooks? Does everybody on the call use QuickBooks?
Do a raise of hand.
Yeah, raise the hand. Okay. All right. Okay, so it looks like everybody here uses QuickBooks, which is great, which is wonderful. Fantastic. So QuickBooks will do this for you. There is a little button on the vendor entry that will allow you. There's a little checkbox that says if it's 1099 eligible. And even if you're not sure if you're going to pay them $600, make that eligible because it will allow you to track it. So running a vendor payment summary in December to identify who exceeds the $600 threshold. Personally, the ongoing team does this every month. We use another system, but essentially it does this for us. So we can track that. Okay. So step 3, monitor payment thresholds and the totals. You may not hit the $600 mark for a vendor, but small recurring payments do add up. So stay proactive, reviewing the totals mid-year and again at Q4. Towards the end of Q4, flagging vendors who approach the reporting threshold and plan ahead so that 1099s are not missed or late. So I will tell you that for the clients that Siegel works on a monthly basis, I start on my soapbox probably about May 1st. And actually, I have a couple of the folks that work with me on the team here, so they can attest to that, that I get on my soapbox. All right. Janice, how many times do I say? Pretty much every
Yeah, quite a bit,
Quite a-
but that's
quite-
good though. It's good
quite a
though.
bit, yep. So we want to also, step 4 is watch for exceptions. 1099s may still be required. If a vendor is a corporation, you still may need to issue a 1099. And that is for lawyers. No matter how much or how little the legal fee is, you do need to send one to every single attorney. And then you paid for medical payments and services to providers. But I'm not sure how many people actually, how many businesses actually do that. And if you paid for fish purchases for resale or cash payments for aquatic life. Yes, there really is an IRS code for that. Believe it or not. Not sure how many of us are doing that in the operations of our business, but it could happen, I suppose.
So,
Okay, and
Aimee,
then
Aimee, quick question. It's going to be a strange question. Is
Mhm.
that for, I'm going to say live or dead fish? Is it for fish for cooking or fit when they say aquatic life, or is that like aquarium fish?
So it could be, yeah, it's for aquatic life, but it's also for if you're buying the fish to sell at your store, your meat
Okay.
market store, they would be dead, I hope.
Okay. But it's just like, it was which way? Is it a commercial for consumption or for pretty viewing in the living room?
Both.
Okay.
And then addressing backup withholding. So if no 1099 is provided, if the payee refuses to or fails to submit a W-9, you may be required to withhold 24% for future payments to them for backup withholding and issue that backup withholding to the IRS on their behalf and still issue a 1099 noting withheld amounts. This applies if the tax ID number is missing or incorrect, the IRS notifies you of a mismatch, the payee is subject to backup withholdings due to prior issues with the IRS. And they are required to submit that paperwork to you. And if the IRS finds out that you are paying a vendor like that, they will submit the paperwork to you and you're required to send that. So keep documentation for your W-9 request in case the IRS review. Absolutely. So send it through email, send it through another system, but have a way of tracking it. And start to gather this information before the end of the year. Do not wait until January because January goes by so quickly. And prior documentation and vendor tracking makes January easier for everybody. It'll become a month that you love. Nobody really loves January because first of all, depending on where you live, it's cold and dreary. Nothing's really going on, and then we have to have this 1099 situation going on. So we don't. Let's make it easier for ourselves. Okay. So preparing. So preparing for the 10. So that was how to gather, but how to prepare them now. Okay. So really using an accounting software, which we all demonstrated that we all use QuickBooks. So that's kind of calculating for you in the background throughout the year. And be sure to exclude non-reporting payments, credit card payments, and merchandise purchases. So when you are, this is not a QuickBooks training, but making sure that when things are coming through your bank feeds and credit card fees, that you are using vendor names. It'll make your life a lot, and do that throughout the months so that it'll make your life a lot easier. So you don't have to, you can enjoy the holidays in December, and January is not a painful experience for you. So you want to make sure that you're verifying the information. So double checking that the vendor name is correct, it's spelled correctly, all of that in your accounting system. Make sure their address is correct. Companies contractors do move around. So you want to make sure that you have the right address prior to the filing. And make sure, you've entered in the tax ID number correctly. You don't want to have that be a mismatch and that come back from the IRS as well. And again, make sure there's no typos or missing information. So we all know that typos happen because most of us are trying to multitask or very busy. And so just taking the time to make sure there are no typos. And then determine the correct form to use. Now, if you use a piece of software that we're going to talk about in the next couple of slides, then you don't have to really worry about that too much. But I think we've talked about the NEC versus the miscellaneous form, or if they need to use other forms, 1099, INT, 1099Ks, you don't have to do as much because those are actually issued by the processor unless you are a processor. And it depends on the amount and the type. Okay. And complete the form accurately. Follow the IRS instructions. Each form has specific boxes for each type of payment. Compensation goes on box 1 of the 1099 NEC. Rent goes on box 1 for the 1099 miscellaneous. And do not round, even though you round on your tax return, do not round on these forms. You want to use the exact dollar amount. Okay. And then again, number 5, double check once again for common errors. So the common errors are name and tax ID mismatches, incorrect amounts, and misclassification on which form to use. So a good example of making sure that you have the correct amounts. So if you have a subcontractor and you pay them for services, but you also pay them for reimbursable expenses. So maybe they had to travel or some kind of reimbursable expenses that you've agreed to in your agreement with them. You only want to include the services amount. If you're reimbursing them for expenses, you don't include that in the 1099 number. So that sometimes can, file people up as well. So it's just important to make sure that you're doing that. And a good way to do that really with QuickBooks is don't book the reimbursable charge to the same GL line that you book the services to. So if you're reimbursing them for travel, book that part of the bill to travel rather than to consulting in the QuickBooks. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. So best practice here is run a 1099 summary report in QBO or QuickBooks or whatever accounting system that you use and cross-check. Make sure all of that. Double check, double check, double check. And then here are the filing and distribution deadlines. So 1099 NEC, has the same tax deadline. So January 31st to the recipient and to the IRS and to any state agency. 1099s, so that's paper and e-file. And 1099 miscellaneous to the IRS is February 28th for paper and March 31st for e-file. Again, my tip here is do not wait. If you can get this all ready and set to go the first couple weeks of January, go for it. Nobody wants to be processing these so the 31st this year is a Saturday. So you're going to want to process everything by the 30th. The IRS will probably allow for February 2nd, which is the Monday, but nobody wants to be doing that last minute. The sooner, the better. You do have to wait until January 1st, though. There are penalties for late filings. They start at $60 a form, like I've mentioned before, and increase depending on how late the form is. If you miss the deadline entirely, you could be penalized up to $330 per form. I don't think that anybody on this call wants that to happen. So that can add up quickly, and really it's unnecessary, right? We don't need to be paying those types of fees. I don't like to pay penalties and interest. I don't know about everybody else on the call, but okay. So filing methods. So there's a variety of ways that you can file these. So as of 2024, the IRS does require electronic filing for businesses that are submitting 10 or more 1099s. So if you file 8, you are not required to do it electronically. You can still do it by paper if you would like. But anything over 10, they are required to be sent electronically. And that goes for, and that's a combined total of 1099s and W-2s. So that's an important thing to know. So that changed as of last year. Paper, which is limited use, is copy A for each 1099 goes to the IRS, accompanied by the 1096, which is summary form, and acceptable only if the submitter has fewer than 10 forms in total, not recommended due to slow processing and higher risk of error. So I will tell you that sending paper anything to the IRS, you are opening yourself up to having them never receive it. And that really started happening during COVID. There are still tractor trailer trucks of paper that probably haven't still been filed since the COVID days. So, yeah. So electronically file when you can. So electronically e-file. So it's required if you are doing 10 or more forms combined. So W-2s and 1099s combined. Offers faster submission, error checking tools, and delivery confirmation. So you can do a couple things. You can e-file using the IRS Fire system for free. It does require a setup and some technical knowledge. I've never used it, so I can't really speak to that. And then they have third-party providers. So they have Avalara 1099, which used to be Track 1099. Avalara purchased Track 1099, I think 2 years ago. And that is the system that we at Siegel Solutions use. So it streamlines platforms, it bulk filings, it helps track 1099s, it allows for multi-state compliance. Like I said, some states require a separate 1099 be submitted to them. Some states do not. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts does require it. The state of Maine, where I live, does not. So, but they will do all of that for you, and they know that. They also have which is really great. They have a tax identification number check. So it will, when you're processing it, it will tell you if that's actually a valid number before you hit process. So and it also allows you to submit these to your recipients electronically if you have an email. So if you have an email and you also have an address, it will automatically send it to the email. You can choose to also have a paper copy mailed to the recipient, but if you don't select that you want it mailed, it won't get mailed if there's an email address. If you don't have an email address, then it will send it out regular mail. The electronic, sending it to the recipients electronically, there's no additional cost, and there's a minimal additional cost if you mail it. So tax 1099 is very similar to Avalara, same kind of thing. And then Intuit QuickBooks also has this as well. However, and this is a big however, if you have vendors in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you do not want to use Intuit QuickBooks because Intuit QuickBooks does not file the state forms. So you can choose to file most of them through there. You'll just have to file state only with something like Avalara or Tax 1099. And the great part about Avalara and Tax 1099 is you don't have to import thing, or you don't have to manually enter or import anything manually through QuickBooks Online. And they actually have a connector for desktop. At least Avalara Tax does. Avalara 1099 does. It's just it connects in with QuickBooks, and it will pull all the information from QuickBooks into the thing, and then you just have to verify it on the screen. So I would say that it cuts down processing for us a lot. So we used to spend, depending on the client, maybe 30 minutes to an hour doing one client. We can now do it in about 10 or 15 minutes because we do have to take the time. I mean, it takes 2 or 3 minutes for it to pull it all, but we do have to verify to make sure everything came through correctly. Okay. So, like I said, the bonus here is that many of the systems will send things electronically. So you can reduce printing and postage costs. And again, keeping copies of 1099s and the Form 1096s and the W-9s and any supporting records for at least 4 years, because that is the look back period for the IRS typically. So you want to make sure that you have all of that at your hands if you ever need it. But nobody wants to go through that. So hopefully none of us have to ever experience that. So, okay, we've talked about what a 1099 is, how to prepare for them, how to process them. So I thought we would talk about what are some of the common errors that are found when doing 1099. So missing or underreporting is a big one. Okay. And some people don't want the IRS to know how much they make. So they will tell you, I'm not giving you a W-9. You still should send them a 1099. So you're not penalized. So the IRS, like I said, the penalties are from 60 to 330 a form. And maybe even if they don't give you the penalty, you're still at audit risk. And everybody wants to try to avoid that at all costs. So again, how to avoid it? Track this stuff year round and not waiting until the end of the year. The wrong form is used, which you do. So in all of the systems that I talked about, you do have to, there's a drop down. You do have to select which form. So it is important that you know which form you need to do. The consequence here, the risk is that misreporting income in the IRS mismatches and there's confusion. Review IRS form instructions and confirm the payment type. Incorrect or missing payee information. So if they reject, you can start to withhold 24%. And then, like again, how do we avoid it? Collecting the W-9s early, verifying the TINs with the IRS tools that we have here. Late filing and delivery. So there are penalties, if there are any, if you're doing late filing. The penalty gets more if the IRS thinks that you did it intentionally. So set internal deadlines. So we here at Siegel have set internal deadlines with our clients that we have to have everything, all of their W-9s need to be to us now, right now, pretty much right now, but we need everything by the 9th of January. We need them to then approve the numbers that we're going to be reporting to the IRS by the 15th or 16th so that we can process everything by the 30th. So not correcting forms promptly. So you may get an informational notice from the IRS that says this is not the correct name or this is not the correct TIN number. You do need to correct those promptly. Because if not, then IRS flag discrepancies and audits trigger. Again, reviewing the forms for accuracy and submitting the correct 1099s as soon as you get that notice is really, really important. Okay. And then missing backup records. IRS may disallow deductions or issue penalties. So you should retain the W-9s, the 1099s, and any records for up to 4 years. So additional pitfalls to watch for. So issuing a 1099 for credit card payments, you don't have to do it. Payments are processed, if they're processed through Square, PayPal, or for any credit card, Visa, MasterCard, whatever, their processor will send it. Failing to report medical or legal payments to corporations. These are the exceptions to the general corporate exemption rule. And really, last minute prep. Let's not wait until January because it really leaves you really little time, right? Because you're trying to get everything over to your CPA. It's the start of the year for many people, so they want to start off the year very strong. And a lot of us just don't have time to do that. So collecting W-9s throughout the year are very important, and talking with your bookkeeper, your accountant, whoever does your 1099s for you, talking about these throughout the year is really, really important. It will help you, believe me. I know it seems like a tedious task, but it's well worth it for sure. Okay. So again, best practices, I just have about 6 or so here. So it's maintaining a vendor master list, tracking the name, the structure, their address, their W-9 status, and it centralizes everything and it really simplifies year-end prep. Okay, tag 1099 vendors eligibility. So marking vendors in the accounting system in QuickBooks, it makes it easier so that you can just go down the list, right? And you're not gonna send, if you order things from Amazon, you're not going to be sending Amazon a 1099, right? You're not going to be sending, if you bring in food or you DoorDash to your office, you're not going to be sending DoorDash a 1099, right? So only for services, rent, and legal. Running your reports in December just to see where you're at, but really running those reports all year long. Communicate with vendors. So, when you start a relationship, say, okay, we this is a non-negotiable. We need this at the beginning of our relationship. But then if you find that they don't give it to you, then really just following up with them. And file early, right? Making sure that we're not filing on January 30th and hoping that it gets accepted by the IRS. Although we do get the exception. If you use Avalara 1099 or a system like that, you do get the confirmation back fairly quickly. It reduces errors, stress, and risk of penalties. And nobody wants stress in their lives, right? Especially after Christmas. That's probably a stressful time for a lot of us, or holidays. So we want to make sure that we're not doing that. And then keep records securely. Retain the W-9s and 1099s and payment logs for 4 years. You do want to make sure that you are keeping the W-9s securely, because they do have your vendor's personal, well, not personal, but tax ID number, address, name. Really important things to keep in a secure location. Okay. And then I also came up with 6 key takeaways. So really knowing who gets a 1099 and who doesn't get a 1099. What is the right form to use? Collecting the W-9s early. I've said it about 10 times in this meeting. Tracking your payments year round. It is a year round activity, not just a December or January activity. File accurately and on time. Double check, double check, double check. And then keeping backup documentation. Documentation. Those are my 6 real big key takeaways from this. And then, okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. I did that pretty well and pretty quickly. So 10 minutes left. So let's use these 10 minutes for questions that we may have, although we did answer some questions throughout.
People can also use the chat if they don't want to ask a
Oh,
question. Oh,
Jane,
looks like
Jane
Jane
has
has a question.
Jane has a question.
Hi, that was super helpful. Thank you so much. I just wanted to clarify I understood a couple of things right. So, S corps, are they treated as a corp for the purpose of these, or are they not a corp?
Yeah, they're considered, they are considered a corp in
A
this.
corp. Okay.
So
S
for us that
corp.
have been doing 1099s for a very long time, that is a change over the last maybe 5 years, 6 years or so. Because S corps, you used to have to send a 1099 to a S corp. You do not have to anymore.
Okay.
And that's always something that's confusing to, especially
Yeah.
for folks that have been preparing for more than a few years.
Okay. No,
I know,
because
I know
I
personally.
received some, and I was like, oh, that was weird. And my other question is the lawyers. So, like, you know, if our firm engages lawyers during the year, we're supposed to send them a 1099?
Yep.
Interesting. Okay, I did not know that.
Nobody does it.
Nobody
Okay, so
does
I'm not the
nobody does
okay, good, because
Jane,
so
you're not the
yeah,
only one, don't worry. But the
Okay.
other thing, and if I can clarify on what Aimee said about lawyers, where the difference in the 1099s, and we have a number of attorneys that do contingency work. So they'll get, let's say, a settlement from a case. That is a 1099. Like when they pay out from that case, that's a 1099, but that's on the miscellaneous, not the NEC. So it's the paying out the money. So when she was talking about a real estate close, attorneys get things two ways on real estate closes. They might get all the proceeds from the close. That's a 1099. If it's a sale, if it's a sale from a corporation, from a company, that's a 1099 on an NEC. But their legal fees for the close would be on an NEC. So you have to like think about what that money was for.
Okay, no, that's super helpful. And what is your thoughts on if we realize we've got companies that haven't done this for past years?
Do it. I
Go
sorry.
and
I would do it.
file
I would
for
do it.
past year. Go back and file even if they're late.
No, don't file, don't go back, but have a new
Okay.
process for the go forward.
Going forward. Okay, yeah. Draw a line in the
Because
sand and move forward.
if you do it back, that's going to push a potential audit for you and for the vendors. So you don't necessarily want to probably do that.
Okay. Helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Aimee,
I
April
mean,
has a question.
if you're working, if your vendors are mostly like business to business, then they really should be, you have to send the 1099s. They're collecting this, so hopefully it like adds up. But sometimes when you have like sole proprietors, stuff like that, they really depend on, hey, I didn't get my 1099, my CPA. Lots of CPAs do require them to do the taxes. So I think April had a question.
Yes, thanks. A follow on with the legal. So for the legal fees, I get that we're supposed to do 1099, but if we paid all the legal fees using a credit card for the
You don't
year.
have to. Yeah,
Okay.
if everything's on a credit card, you do not. So anything on a credit card, you do not, because whatever processor processes your credit card is going to send that out to.
Okay. Yeah,
to
because they
your
have a
vendor.
link on their website. I just put the credit card number in, it pays the legal
Yep,
fees.
so
So
you
I
do
don't
not
have
have
to
to-
think about it.
Nope,
So
do not.
Thanks.
can I just add to that? Because I've had the problem. And that is if you're using QuickBooks, if it's on a credit card, you need to be very, very careful when you're entering into QuickBooks, not just putting it as an expense, but putting it as a credit card expense, because it looks at transaction type when it does the 1099. And we've had many clients who have paid vendors two ways. One month they'll pay the legal fee by credit card, the other way they'll pay it by check or wire. And you want to make sure that you're capturing the ones that were not on the credit cards if they're doing a mixed payment. And in QuickBooks, the 1099 feature pulls it from transaction type.
Mm-hmm.
That's a Lori tip.
Thanks, Lori. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a super good that was a great question though, because that's a really good clarification. Because I think that pulls for a lot of our clients, including our firm, that pulls out a lot of vendors by paying
Right.
both credit card. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And just very easy to put it in as a credit card expense. If you're bringing in for the bank transactions, it will make it a credit card expense, but we know we should be putting them in and having it matched.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
So can I ask a quick question to everyone? And that is, I was bad and didn't set up a poll for Aimee on this. But if people can put in chat, we're planning our webinars for 2026. And if you can put in chat topics that you'd like for them. There's 4 of us to do webinars, myself, Aimee, Ed Jaworski, and Jeff Siegel. And we'd love to do them on what you guys want to hear. So if you can just put that in chat and Debbie can grab that, that would be great. Or email us back when you get the follow-up for today.
Yeah. So, also, so following up. So, you can always follow up with me, and my contact is just Aimee at siegelsolutions.com, and that is my direct line. So, and Aimee is AIMEE. If you do AMY, you will not get me. You probably get a bounce. Well, you will get a bounce back because there's no Aimee. Siegelsolutions.com. But it was great having you. Really appreciate taking time out, and I know December can be busy and stressful as well. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to meet with us, and hopefully you found this informational and all of that.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Aimee. This is great.
Okay. Have a great day, everybody. And we will send I'll work with Debbie to send the
The
PowerPoint
recording. Yep.
and the PowerPoint. Yeah.
And
Okay,
April,
thanks.
I love that idea. Thank you.